Hey, Jimmy Smith, now talking about a subject that I can't believe I'm talking about. Jake Paul, Mike Tyson. Serious? I thought this was a joke, like I'm sure a lot of people did when they initially saw something about it on social media or whatever. It comes up in your feed. It's the dumbest thing I can think of. Let me rewind significantly. When it comes to any freak show boxing, any of it, I have a very simple rule of thumb. The only thing that interests me as a combat sports fan, as whatever, a pundit, however you want to put it, is two guys or gals in their prime fighting for stakes. That's it. That's it. It's the only thing that interests me. Anything else I don't find interesting. I'm not saying it does or does not have the right to exist, or isn't some segment of the population that would be interested in it. Me personally, if it isn't two fighters in or somewhere near their respective primes, I'm not that interested. I'm not that interested in comebacks. I don't really like comebacks as a rule, because my number one rule is if you couldn't do it at 25, what makes you think you can do it at 35? If I saw you at 25 and I saw you at your absolute best, anything beyond that when you're in your 40s or making a comeback, your late 30s, whatever it is going to be a disappointment. It almost has to be a disappointment. When I saw prime GSP, and I saw him come back and beat Michael Bisping, good performance, and he won, but you could see he wasn't the same guy. I had already spent years seeing the best GSP, so even that GSP, I went, I can see he's not the same. Managed to win, it's a great story and all that stuff, but even a comeback like that, of a guy who wasn't coming off a bunch of losses, who wasn't that old, I still wasn't that interested. You can see the cracks in the armor. And so there has been no freak show boxing that's ever interested me. I have to talk about it because it's news, but I'm not interested as a fan in this. And this is one of the worst of the worst. And there are a few things to kind of dive into this for me. Number one is Jake Paul is seeing that fighting boxers who just aren't very good isn't going to pay the bills. That fighting Paul Borland, is that who he beat last time? Yeah, anybody? I mean, beating some scrub in the first round that no one's ever heard of, which is what most fighters do boxing on their way up, making their way up, and I'll get to his trajectory in a minute. A lot of fighters do it. You're not getting pay-per-view prices for that. That's the problem, is that the combat sports world, however you want to define it, won't pay for Jake Paul to beat up nobodies. He's not going to make enough money. So I think what he realized, which is his last couple fights, where he beat guys who were boxers, technically, weren't any good and didn't have any name, it didn't perform and didn't make him money. Beating up, I think, over-the-hill mixed martial artists like Nate Diaz and Ben Askren and stuff, Tyron Woodley, of course, twice. I think he's realizing that has a comparatively short shelf life. People got increasingly disinterested in him taking on mixed martial artists who were, once again, past their primes. So now he's gone back to the freak show well, and it's an unbelievably over-the-hill Mike Tyson that apparently he's fighting. So it's a tacit admission that just doing it, I'm going to be a world champion. I'm going to beat, a bunch of boxers who don't know what they're doing, and I'm going to earn my stripes and be a world champion. I'll get into a minute why that's ludicrous. But beyond that, he's realizing that taking on boxers you've never heard of isn't going to make him money. He needs freak show opponents. He needs that in order to make money. And Mike Tyson at this point is the most freak show of freak show opponents. One of the things you hear all the time, not all the time, but sometimes, from Jake Paul fans or Jake Paul apologists, whatever, they will say, well, a lot of boxers just getting started beat up a lot of people you've never heard of. If you look at almost all top flight boxers, in their first 10 fights, 15 fights, they took on just nobodies, just unbelievably bad fighters. That's kind of normal. You're not asking me to pay real money to see those guys. When Floyd Mayweather and Roy Jones Jr. and all these other legends in boxing, Oscar De La Hoya, and I saw all of them, were coming up, nobody was paying for them. Nobody was paying that much attention. You can either have fights that are meaningless against scrubs, or you can have meaningful fights that people pay money for. The problem with freak show boxing is it expects both. Pay X for a pay-per-view, but this fight is still meaningless, and one, if not both, of the fighters are far substandard to what an actual professional boxer at the elite level would be. So it's making a demand of us that is unfair looking at the matchup itself. Floyd Mayweather, what was his name? He beat up a guy from Ada, Oklahoma. I remember that in his second or third fight on the undercard, and just, destroyed him in the first round. I wasn't paying money for it. These guys were fighting, generally speaking, on undercards where nobody was paying particular attention to them. Sure, Oscar De La Hoya was making a lot of money. He's an Olympic gold medalist. Roy Jones Jr. took silver, got robbed. All these things where if you were a great amateur, you might get eyeballs on you. But even then, Top Rank was paying the Golden Boy, Oscar De La Hoya, a lot of money, but he wasn't headlining pay-per-views until later in his career, and he was up there amongst the elite and ready to go. So the problem with the Jake Pauls of the world and all freak show boxing is it asks us to invest our own capital early on in their careers, and that's to me, that's stupid. The usual trajectory for people who don't know the boxing business is the promoters lose money on most boxers early in their careers. They had to pay. Top Rank said De La Hoya was making $50,000 a fight in his early fights. Well, they're not making $50,000 off his fights yet, right? He wasn't headlining the show. So they're putting money into you knowing later on we're going to make millions and tens of millions or whatever it is, but they're losing money early. So Top Rank lost money on Floyd Mayweather and Oscar De La Hoya and all these guys early on. Then when they get big, that's when you make your real money. So they know that. We can't ask people to pay pay-per-view prices for even a gold medalist amateur on the way up. You're not going to make money on the way up. So that's why the whole Jake Paul thing is stupid. He is a beginning boxer, essentially, and saying, hey, pay pay-per-view prices. The only way you're going to get that is with freak show fights. So, which are meaningless and don't get him anywhere. And his whole thing of I'm going to be a world champion. You are 27 years old. No, you're not. Now, you'd be there by now. 27 is usually your athletic prime. And when I watch him box, I see a talented beginner. We are in an era of combat sports, and boxing has always been like this, by the way. But MMA, there was a time when you could start maybe in your early 20s, late teens, and if you were a good athlete and maybe had a background in something else, and you could really be, great. Not anymore. Not anymore. When I'm looking at professional grappling stuff now, my kids are 16, 17 years old, and they're ass kicking in professional grappling. There was a time when you could start in your 20s and be pretty good. You could do some things. Not anymore. MMA, not anymore. They're starting too young. And so the normal trajectory of a boxer is 100 or so at least amateur fights. Then you get into your pros in your late teens, early 20s, and then you fight some scrubs. And so that right in your physical prime, 24, 25, 26, that's when you're at your peak and making your big money. You can't start in your early 20s with a few notable exceptions. Sergio Martinez started late. He was a professional cyclist, great athlete, started very late in his career. But so the whole Jake Paul, I'm going to be a world champion is absurd. Now, the Mike Tyson thing. Why Mike? Why now? Why all these things? There's no other way to describe this other than a shameless cash grab by all parties involved. That Mike is just going, okay, great, wonderful. But part of why I feel, if you're watching this and you are, let's say in your 20s or 30s, I feel bad for you. Because I saw a prime Mike Tyson. I saw Mike Tyson take on Trevor Berbick, right? I saw him, Tyrell Biggs. I saw some of his, his prime fights, right? Michael Spinks, all this stuff. Razor Ruddock, I remember that. So when I was a kid, I was 9 or 10 years old, I saw his rise up through the ranks. And what you have seen, even since, I would say, obviously the Holyfield fight, has all been on the downside. And you just might not know it. So that's the sad thing to me is the people that want to see Mike Tyson, you're never going to see Mike Tyson. I'm watching this fight to see Mike Tyson. You're never going to see Mike Tyson, except on YouTube. Right? Me, as someone who saw Mike Tyson, watching Roy Jones Jr., fight Anthony Pettis kind of made me sick because I saw him at his best. I saw him fight James Toney and went, I can't believe how good this guy is. It was incredible. It was amazing. So these are just sad to me because I don't have that nostalgia because I realize how far separated Mike Tyson is from his prime. You could see it once again when he came back and he fought Francois Botha after he was suspended for biting obviously Evander Holyfield's ear. He came back and fought a guy named Francois Botha. And I remember watching that fight, and Botha was actually winning until Mike knocked him out. And I went, God, he really is not the same guy. He had us fooled for a minute when he first came back. And people who say they weren't fooled, dude, go back and listen to the actual raw commentary of like Frank Bruno too. And he's back. He has all the skills. Mike is going to destroy everybody. And, we all bought into it. Partly because he was just devastating guys, right? People who weren't analyzing the actual tactics of he's really not moving like he used to, and even when he lands big punches, he knocks guys down, knocks them out, but not like he used to. Right? He's just not quite the same. He was still arguably good enough to be world champion until he ran into Holyfield. But I think that's a big part of it too. Is people who want to see Mike Tyson again, you'll never see Mike Tyson again. Right? You'll see him on YouTube, and that's it. So some other angles that I've been seeing all over the place is, hey, Netflix is getting into the boxing business. Great. Is this really how you want to start? Because part of Netflix's entry into the boxing business, what people are hoping for is a return of legitimacy to boxing in terms of it being a every person sport, right? A crossover sport. Everybody, when I was a kid, watched boxing. It wasn't a niche thing. And the ability to kind of take it out of that into the mainstream again, which it used to be totally mainstream. This is not how you do that. Or this is just, freak show boxing. And the people, and I think Teddy Atlas is one of them, love Teddy Atlas as a broadcaster, and nice guy as well. But the idea that Teddy Atlas once said about Jake Paul is, he's introducing boxing to all these young kids and fans. And I said, are they sticking around for boxing? Or are they just there to watch Jake Paul? They're not watching Jake Paul when he's fighting boxers who don't have any name. They're not sticking around then. So that's my question, is if they don't stick around for actual boxing, he's not bringing fans to boxing. He's bringing Jake Paul fans to Jake Paul, which is a different thing. So when I look at Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul, it's its own kind of freak show bubble. I don't think people watch that and then stick around and go, boy, I really want to see the next thing on Netflix, unless the next thing on Netflix is some kind of legitimate boxing that we can all get into. So it's its own entity. I remember when I called Bellator 49 that had Ken Shamrock and Hoist Gracie and Dada 5000 and Kimbo Slice, and it got the highest viewership in Bellator history. And they were all thrilled. And I said, yeah, but how many are sticking around to see the rest of our product? Because this was so weird and different. These weren't Bellator branded guys. None of those 4 guys ever fought in Bellator again. So if you came for those 4 guys, which was the main and co-main, there's no reason for you to tune in the next Bellator. None of those guys are going to be on it. And the rest of the card was not very good. So it became one of those things of, if you give somebody a product that's so different from your normal product, I like this. Yeah, but we don't normally serve that. Get what I'm saying? So the problem with Jake Paul and Mike Tyson introduce a bunch of fans to boxing, people might check out the freak show, but first of all, I don't think the product's going to be very good. I don't think the fight itself is going to be very good at all. It will highlight the negative. And my obvious question to anyone who disagrees is, which of these freak show boxing fights was really worth watching? Which one did you watch and go, man, that was cool? Because all the ones I've seen have been terrible. And I watch them because I have to, obviously, if I'm talking about them somewhere. But, when have you watched and go, boy, that was a good use of my money and my however long amount of time that I had to watch this? And if you don't, you're not going to come back. So it's a big risk that this is your first one, and Netflix, the product won't be very good. The fight itself will not have people going, boy, can't wait to see more of this. It never is, right? Like Vitor Belfort, Evander Holyfield, I guess some people might go, okay, and then obviously Holyfield looked terrible, and it was a joke, and you don't go back to it. That's the problem. The only freak show boxing match to be entertaining, I would say, was Tyson Fury, Francis Ngannou. I really enjoyed watching that fight and watching the Anthony Joshua fight, which is in a couple days. would be entertaining. Other than that, they've all been god-awful. So, backing up from a larger perspective, one thing I will say is, hey, look, they're not taking tax dollars, okay? They're both adults, Jake Paul and Mike Tyson, and if they want to cash a huge paycheck, okay, it is at the expense of the legitimacy of a sport I really care about. That's the problem. It's at the expense of boxing. Because when something like this is the face of boxing, when I was a kid, it was Sugar Ray Leonard and Tommy Hearns, it was a big change. When I was a kid, it was a prime Mike Tyson was the face of boxing. And so that's it. Like, in a larger perspective, like, is this a victimless crime in a sense where, okay, they're not taking public money to put on this spectacle. They're not asking taxpayers to buy a freaking stadium to show it in. Okay, right. I'll give them that one. But as someone who cares about boxing and sport, who wants the boxing world to be focused on legitimate fights that really mean something between top-level professionals for real money and real stakes, this is a step in the exact wrong direction. So whether I'm wrong or I'm right, let me know in the comment section. Give me a subscribe. Give me a like. Let me know what you think. All right? Later.